The gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, December 14, 2010, Brian Terry was gunned down, and we began knowing more about Fast and Furious shortly thereafter. But you have said, people representing you have said repeatedly you didn't know about it before then. I've sent you a number of letters. Senator Grassley sent you a number of letters. You mentioned in your opening statement the Speaker's letter. The Speaker did not limit the scope of the subpoenas you're under an obligation to respond to. He simply asked you for response to two key areas. He did not revoke any subpoenas. However, you implied that we were working together when, in fact, since May 18th, nothing has come from your department, not one shred of paper. I want to ask you, first of all, today, have you and your attorneys produced internally the materials responsive to the subpoenas?
We believe that we have responded to the subpoena.
No, Mr. Attorney General, you're not a good witness. A good witness answers the question asked. So let's go back again. Have you and your attorneys produced internally the materials responsive? In other words, have you taken the time to look up our subpoena and find out what material you have responsive to it, or you've simply invented a privilege that doesn't exist?
You're saying internally. Have we?
Internally, have you pulled all that information?
We've looked at 240 custodians. We have processed millions of electronic records, and we've reviewed over 140,000 documents and produced to you about 7,600.
So 140,000 documents. How many documents are responsive but you are withholding at this time?
Well, we've produced 7,600.
Look, I don't want to hear about the 7,600.
Chairman, I would beg to allow...
The lady is out of order. Would the lady
Mr.
please
Chairman,
suspend?
in parliamentary inquiry,
time.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I would beg to allow the Attorney General to be able to finish his answer.
The Attorney General will be allowed to answer the question.
I thank the
and
Chairman.
The Attorney General will have more time to do that if we don't have interruptions.
And I would like my time reclaimed that was used up by the lady.
The gentleman will be given an additional time.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we take back the time that Mr. Lundgren used, the 2 minutes over his time that he used, and
you want to give me additional 2 minutes? I'm fine with it.
No, I'm going to give you the 45 seconds I yielded back, but if we're going to apply a rule on one side of this aisle,
let's get back to
then
regular.
we ought to apply the rule consistently.
Let's get back to regular order. The
point
gentleman
I'm
from
trying to make.
California has the time, and the Attorney General will be allowed to answer the question.
Isn't it true, Mr. Attorney General, that you've not produced a log of materials withheld, even though our investigators have asked for it?
I know that, I'm not sure about that. I know that the...
Okay, I'm sure you didn't, so let's move on. March 15th, 2010, before Brian Terry was gunned down. April 19th, 2010, before Brian Terry was gunned down. May 7th, 2010, before Brian Terry was gunned down. May 17th, 2010, before Brian Terry was gunned down. June 2nd, 2010, before Brian Terry was gunned down. July 2nd, the real date of our independence, 2010, obviously earlier, before Brian Terry was gunned down. These wiretap applications, which we did not subpoena, but which were given to us by a furious group of whistleblowers that are tired of your stonewalling, indicate that a number of key individuals in your administration, in fact, were responsible for information contained in here that clearly shows that the tactics of Fast and Furious were known. They were known and are contained in these wiretaps. I understand you've read these wiretaps since we brought them to your attention. Is that correct?
I have read them, and I disagree with the conclusion you've just reached.
So let me go through a very simple line of questioning, if I may, Mr. Attorney General. James Cole, Deputy Attorney General, has written that the Department has a greater obligation than just checking the legal sufficiency and approving wiretap application. He thinks that applications also have to comply with DOJ policy. Is that correct?
Applications have to agree with DOJ policy?
That's what he said.
Sure.
Okay. During a transcribed interview, Deputy Assistant Attorney General Jason Weinstein testified that senior officials approving the wiretap applications do not read the wiretap applications. Is this practice acceptable to you?
They read summaries of the applications. That is a process that has been used by this administration and by all previous administrations. It is the way in which the Office of Enforcement.
And are you aware that federal
I mean, you know,
federal
can I answer the
judges, to
question?
your knowledge?
Can I answer my question? The question you've asked?
No, you've given me a sufficient answer considering the amount of questions I have and the amount of time I have. You're okay with that practice? You've already answered that. So, would you agree that senior officials are responsible for documents they sign? I would assume the answer is yes. So now let me ask you the question. Jason Weinstein, is he responsible for what is in these wiretaps?
Is he responsible?
He's a responsible officer under statute. Is he responsible for them even if he only read a summary?
He did not create those affidavits. He did not create that material. He would have been a person as a deputy assistant attorney general who would have reviewed the material.
So when Congress writes a statute that requiring certain individuals be responsible, such as Jason Weinstein, Lanny Brewer, and yourself,
Regular order, Mr. Chairman.
No.
you've interrupted-
Regular order, Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
in the middle of a question.
The Attorney General will be allowed to answer this question.
And ask the question,
I'm
Mr. Chairman.
halfway through it if you'll quit interrupting. If in fact the statute says they're responsible, and if in fact they're not read, then in fact,
Regular
how
order,
are the
Mr.
American
Chairman.
people to understand
Regular
who is
order, Mr.
responsible for what is contained in these
Attorney General will
documents
be allowed to answer
being
this
in
question.
fact,
The gen-
because anyone of ordinary reading, including the ATF director, former director Melson, anyone reading these, according to him, would be sick to their stomach because they would be immediately aware
Does
of
he
the
have a
tactics.
question, Mr. Chairman?
So, who is responsible, Mr. Attorney General?
All right. You really conflated a bunch of things here. The responsibility.
You've delivered so little and done
Regular
so much
order
well.
now, Mr. Chairman. Will he be allowed to
No,
answer the question now?
Attorney General will be allowed to answer the question, but I'd appreciate no more interruptions so the AG can answer the question.
The responsibility about which you speak is, in fact, the responsibility of a Deputy Assistant Attorney General looking at those summaries to make sure that there is a basis to go into court and to ask that court to grant the wiretap based on a determination that a responsible official makes that probable cause exists to believe that a wire facility has been used in the commission of a crime. They do not look at the affidavits to see if, in fact, to review all that is engaged, all that is involved in the operation. I have read those now. I have read those. I've read those. I've read them from wide receiver as well. And I can say that what has happened in connection with Fast and Furious was done in the same way as wiretap applications were done under the previous administration in wide receiver. I've looked at the summaries, and they acted in a way that's consistent with the practice and the responsibility that they have as defined by the statute.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. The gentlewoman from California.